Hi, good afternoon. My name's Everett Colby, and I did my research project on evangelicals and their use of campfire meetings and revivals during the 1800s. Campfire meetings and revivals played an integral part in the spreading of Christianity in the 1800s. Through these methods, preachers broke the traditional bonds of preaching and braved a new venue to spread the word of Christ that was more receptive to their flock. Through the use of campfire meetings and revivals, preachers reached tens of thousands of Christians. And through my research, I tried to capture the significance and mythology behind this great evangelical movement of that time. It was very highly successful and ultimately defined the religious map of America today. The leaps and bounds in which these preachers push forward the message of Christ to their flock is is pretty much it's unequivocal to any other movement in the U.S. other than modern day technology through the internet and reaching people through social media. This kind of was their venue. This was their social media, and it's really interesting topic when you start really peeling back the onions and seeing how they effectively did it. The Campfire Revivals of the early 1800s was a series of evangelical Christian meetings, which began in Logan County, Kentucky, which ignited the subsequent events that influenced several of the leaders of the Second Great Awakening. It's important to understand that these events represent a transition from traditions carried over from Europe to innovations that responded to the unique needs and personality of Americans in the new century. The startling manifestations of revival fervor that first occurred in June of 1800 at the Red River Meeting House, which was a small Presbyterian congregation led by James McGreedy. He began as a Scottish sacrament service, but brought about the important innovation of serial religious services, later known as these camp fire meetings. These multi-day gatherings hosted people from great distances for outdoor services, focused on a heartfelt conversion and religious enthusiasm that came to characterize especially a rural evangelicalism throughout the 19th century. The Logan County revival quickly spread into the larger Cumberland region of southwestern Kentucky and Middle Tennessee and expanded outward in all directions, attracting the attention of evangelical leaders such as Presbyterian turned Disciples of Christ leader Barton Stone and Methodist Francis Ashbury and Peter Cartwright, as well as leaders in the Shaker and Cumberland Presbyterian movements, all of whom attended the revival meetings in their initial year-long period, beginning from June 1800 and continuing through May of 1801. In 1801, James McGreedy stood at the juncture of two centuries, looking back into the tradition of his spiritual fathers and forward to the children of the new century in a young republic. It was important to understand that in these times, they were trying to reach, America was trying to come into its own identity, so they were trying to reach forward and say, hey, how do we reach our masses? How do we reach our flocks? And through this avenue of approach, James McGreedy found it more effective to spread the message, almost like the telephone game, where they had these revivals and people were open to doing and whatever part of their faith that they wanted to do and rejoice and follow the footsteps of God and break the bonds of traditional European standards. James McGreedy witnessed the flowering of new forms of religious expressions thriving at the grassroots, where Bible reading and hymn singing, camp meetings, and revival preaching were primary expressions of religious piety and feeling. Reflecting the doctrines of the new birth among the common people, largely as a result of the revival, religion was less hierarchical and controlled than in the preceding century, as well as more democratic and diverse. Coming from the European standard, when pilgrims and Puritans seeking religious freedom began to arrive in the New World, they began to evangelize the Indian children. And following the War of Independence, many founding fathers sought to secure the well-being of the American Republic by fostering the biblical principles of republicanism through the American Sunday School Union. The overwhelming majority of America's academic institutions were thoroughly Christian, including all of the Ivy League schools. So abundant was the evidence in support of the fact that America had been birthed and developed by Christians, that on February 29th, 1892, the Supreme Court affirmed that America was, in fact, a Christian nation. The campfire meeting was only one of many institutions that the American Christians used to advance the cause of Christ, but many church leaders in denominations have greatly benefited from the ministry of the campfire meetings and revivals. In most early camp meetings, the focal point of the gathering was receiving of communion. The banner year for these camp meetings was really 1811, when from 10 to 33% of the entire American population attended at least one. Many camp meetings lasted six to 9 days. Eventually, 4 days became the fixed number, with meetings beginning on Friday afternoon or evening and continuing until Monday afternoon. One proverb was said that the good people go to camp meetings on Friday, the backsliders on Saturday, the roadies Saturday night, and then gentlemen and lady sinners on Sunday. Many people at the early camp meetings displayed unusual physical manifestations. Obviously, through the Holy Spirit, they felt that they had to physically manifest their love for Christ, from fainting, rolling, to singing and dancing. In some cases, drinking was such a problem at some of these camp meetings that some states even prohibited the sale of intoxicating beverages with a 1 or 2 mile radius of the meeting. An observer describing the preaching of James McGready said Father McGready would so describe heaven that you would almost see its glories, and he would talk in such an array of hell and its horrors before the wicked that they would tremble and quake, imagining the lake of fire and brimstone yawning to overwhelm them. The great revival of the early 1800s began with an emphasis on Christian unity, with many denominations participating together. By 1810, the revival had resulted in at least 2 distinct splinters from the Presbyterian Church: the Christian Church and the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. Defending camp meetings, James B. Finley said, "Much may be said about camp meetings, but take them all in all, for practical exhibition of religion, for unbounded hospitality to strangers, for unfeigned and fervent spirituality, give me a country camp meeting against the world." Many church leaders in the Presbyterian Church saw the importance of these campfire meetings and saw the impact that it had on the local populace. And the fact that this message was reaching these people was just even more of a catalyst to continue on with these meetings and just spreading the message of Christ throughout newfound America was paramount in the spreading of Christianity, especially through the southern states. It was a very effective means on gathering massive amounts of people and spreading that message so that the message of Christ could be relayed to these people in a very effective mean. Campfire meetings had a huge influence on both religious practice and society. The meetings were instrumental in transforming the social landscape of the South and the nation. Church memberships exploded in the early years of these campfire meetings, and Methodist membership rolls alone doubled. Baptists capitalized on the enthusiasm generated by camp meetings and soon became the largest denomination in the South, and eventually the nation. Campfire meetings were extremely important towards the end of the 1800s, when after the devastation caused by the Civil War, religion and camp meetings helped define and heal the defeated South, especially in the rural communities in and around the Appalachians. By that time, the Methodists and the Baptists no longer required remote revivals to support their growth and outreach, but the small holiness groups began to hold camp meetings to recapture some of the fervor lost during the war and the Reconstruction years. Out of these meetings grew the evangelical Pentecostal movements. These groups abandoned the doctrinal guidelines of the large traditional denominations and rejected learned preaching for spiritual-led utterance. Uniquely, the Appalachian and Nature Pentecostal and Holiness churches are direct descendants of the Second Great Awakening and camp meetings that have proliferated throughout that entire region. In the rural South, religion has long been a component of the region's social fabric. Church and worship exist within rather than removed from life's daily activities, and camp meetings were examples of both rural mountain interdependence and independence in itself. As part of the region's heritage, camp meetings were important building blocks in the construction of the distinct Southern identity. Campfire meetings in the 1800s were an integral part of the fabric of this nation, and they helped push forward the message of Christ in large amounts to people who through other means did not have the ability to hear the words of Christ, because preachers were so far and few between that this was their only means to spread the message of Christ in that era to multiple people. That they felt that this was the best way to capture the essence of America and to have our own identity when discussing preaching and church building and laying the seed of the message of Christ. That this was definitely the most effective means in the South, where reaching people through normal means was not an option. People didn't read. There was no local church. You gathered for these revivals and you preached and loved and heard the message of Christ, and then you went out and you lived those values of Christ, and you told the stories of Christ, and you told the stories of the Bible. That was their effective means, and that was the message that these people were trying to spread. I very much enjoyed researching this subject. I hope that you take away something from my research project. It was very enjoyable for me, and I learned a lot. Thank you for this class, and thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I hope you all have a great day.